So introducing Brad Rice, who is a partner at Ashurst. So Brad has, I think, almost 8 years you've been at Ashurst now, Brad, and about 7 years at Nabarro before that, doing financial services reg advisory. So I'm gonna come down. Does anyone have a roving mic for me? Oh, great. How's that? Yep, that's great. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. DORA. So I've been doing a bit of reading about DORA, but can we start by assuming that I know nothing at all about it?
Yep.
And so we start there. And maybe we do a bit of, does anyone know what DORA stands for?
Oh, let's do a show of hands. Put your hands up if you know what DORA is.
Yeah. What does DORA stand for? Well, we've got a few, but not many.
It's not the cartoon character.
So, Brad, do you wanna start people off with the basics?
Sure. So it's an EU regulation on operational resilience, so the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It is focused on obviously European entities. We'll come on to the scope in a minute, but actually it's part of a global G20 commitment to look at the resiliency of financial services and financial markets, looking at ever-increasing digitalization. It's the next evolution of recovery and resolution planning, BRRD, and sort of the trying to ensure the continuity of services in the event of stress events. And obviously with increasing digitalization, more and more data usage, etc., cyber attacks, bad actors, nation states, it's become more and more important in recent times. Perfect.
Thanks a lot. And just very quickly, because I'm now sort of thinking in terms of deadlines, we probably ought to cover that. What are the deadlines looking like for DORA compliance?
Pretty tight. So you should, or if you're in scope, you should be into the depths of your DORA implementation plans. 17th of January is the go live date. Everyone's been trying to push that back and negotiate a little bit of a soft landing. It doesn't appear that that's going to be happening. So we'll come on to that.
And who's most affected by DORA? If you sort of survey the regulated landscape, what sort of firms and I guess functions as well? We might as well try and kill that one at the same time.
Yep. So it directly applies to European regulated entities, any European regulated entity. So if you're a bank, an insurer, fund manager, asset manager, even the new crypto asset service providers under MiCA, anybody that is regulated in Europe is directly in scope of this regime. It then also indirectly applies if you're part of a group, potentially to your parent companies, your group companies, if you receive intra-group services. So if you're a European offices and you're dependent on your US, your UK or Asian parent, as an example, because of the subcontracting provisions and the intra-group arrangements, you do need to ensure that you're pushing obligations down your subcontracting chain into the second, third, fourth, fifth line of subcontracting, depending on how significant that is. So a lot of people here, potentially with US influence, UK influence, thinking you're out, you're probably not. This also isn't just, well, the DORA is a European thing, but the actual operational resilience focus, we obviously have it here in the UK, slightly narrower, more outcomes focused regime. The US are looking at it now, they're a bit behind the curve. We're seeing it across in Asia. Australia has CPS 230, very similar things going on as well. So it's a global movement looking at operational resilience across the piece.
Perfect. And now let's get practical, Brad. The work that you're doing with your clients, what are the most common kind of issues and problems that those clients are facing in terms of tackling DORA?
Common problems with any piece of European regulation, it's the lack of clarity as a result of 27 member states trying to quibble over what's in and what's out. So at the moment, still very much identifying what is a critical function. Some of you would have done BRRD, you would have done recovery and resolution planning. UK firms would have gone through UK operational resilience and identified your important business services. They are the baseline, that's probably the starting point. You need to go up a few levels because the DORA definition of a critical function and an ICT service provider is much broader than that. So entities, functions, vendors that you've discounted for those regimes probably now get brought back into scope. So you need to go back to basics, have a look at what your ICT risk management framework looks like, have a look at what your third-party risk management processes look like, and identify who is actually in scope of the regime to start with. Map all of those to what is your critical functions. Even those that don't support critical functions need to be remediated for some contractual requirements if they're not already. And that's sort of just one arm of it. The other arm that we're working on is policies and procedures. This is actually probably the first and a really good opportunity to have a look holistically at how your firm deals with operational resilience. You've probably got teams across IT, information security, data security, operations, HR, compliance, legal, etc., that are responsible for different parts of it. BCP planning, for example, exit planning, disaster recovery, people that handle third-party risk management. All of these things probably need to come together to the extent they aren't already. We've seen a lot of clients that deal with these things in silos. Very few clients have them all under a nice umbrella. And I think it was Orlando at the Bank of England that described this a couple of years ago as a marriage of disciplines. This is an opportunity to bring lots of different people and functions within your organisations together to look at operational resilience more holistically, to ensure that if something were to happen to you or to the markets in which you operate, you can continue to provide your services without a major detriment either to your clients, your financial performance, or the market stability.
And when, in your experience, where firms are starting to go down through their supply chains, and they maybe have many different relationships which they subcontract, how deep are they going, and how much diligence are they doing on those dependencies that they have, and to what extent do vendors and suppliers know about DORA and are ready to actually help them and give them the information they need to feel confident that they might be DORA compliant?
It depends on how far you're going and what your attitude is to risk. I mean, some of us who are subject to EBA outsourcing requirements will already be familiar with outsourcing chains, and there's been a lot of focus on this already. Effectively, what we consider the rule says is if you are subcontracting a material part of the service, then you have to look through to the next line of subcontractors. If that line then subcontracts further a material part of the service, you then have to look beyond that as well. So to the extent, if you're using an IT service provider for, well, let's not use cloud services because we'll all end up in a cloud service at the end of it. But if you're outsourcing for a function and they are hosted in the cloud, obviously you need to look behind the immediate service provider to who the cloud provider is and work out where you get to. Now, invariably, that will end up at one of the big cloud service providers, trying to push down your contractual requirements that DORA imposes on you to an intermediary that backs out to AWS or to Microsoft or to GCP. If they can't get the financial services addendum, they will be very hard pushed to give you the contractual requirements and comfort that you need. So you're not always going to be able to push down your contractual reliance and responsibilities and rely on the contract. You're going to have to look more holistically about what other information and data and comfort can you get as part of your due diligence and onboarding of that vendor. There's a number of sort of cloud resellers out there as well that have this problem, but it's a known problem. We've dealt with it. You should have hopefully dealt with it for outsourcing and operational resilience already. But it's going to be one of those perennial problems that keeps coming up on the contract remediation. We'll have similar issues around pen testing. Nobody wants to be pen tested. Actually, pen testing probably introduces more risks into the financial systems, but EU regulators don't seem to understand that. And they seem to think that everyone can just go around pen testing everyone and it'll all be fine and no one's going to cause any problems. So that's going to be a major problem. Audit and access rights, always a problem under outsourcing at the moment. Again, the cloud providers have been trying to educate the regulators around why audit and access rights for data centers is difficult, and the more that people know where the data centers are for the big cloud providers, that in itself decreases the resilience and increases the risk to the financial systems, because everyone then knows where the data centers are and where all the data is stored. So that we speak to a lot of people on both sides of the equation, both the cloud providers and the regulated firms. there does feel to be a bit of a disconnect and an educational piece there, but the regulators seem to be moving slowly in the right direction on cloud, but it's taken ages to get them there.
And while we're talking about regulators, in your experience so far, are there any that are, you know, particularly forward and driving this, and where you would think guidance and precedent and also supervision is going to be clearer than other regulators? Are there any in at this stage that you can say, yeah, if you are overseen by this regulator or that, you really have to get your act together on DORA?
So we've seen the AMF in France has come out and put operational resilience as one of its regulatory priorities. Now, whether that's just lip service as part of a business plan, and you know, that's to be seen. We don't know yet. But the French regulators have laid down a marker. The CBI in Ireland has borrowed the UK operational resilience regime. So they've gone forward. They've sort of preloaded the DORA requirements and borrowed the UK concepts of operational resilience. If any of you are in scope of the Irish regime, then there is a difference between what you've had to do so far and where DORA's got to. The BaFin across in Germany, again, for a long time, we've seen audit findings and regulators asking questions around outsourcing and on operational resilience and what are you doing around this stuff as well. So the usual suspects are leading the foray. I suspect we won't see any enforcement action soon. I think lots of people have been lobbying to get the deadline pushed back a little bit. That has been firmly resisted through the industry bodies that we're part of. That's been pushed back. What we're hearing in the corridors of the European regulators is that it's going to be similar to sort of MiFID II on board, in that if you're not perfectly compliant on day one, as long as you've shown a plan and you've made some progress and you've got a project plan to implement this, you've probably got a bit of a soft landing, a bit of a runway to show full compliance over a longer period of time. So that's what we're working on. You've also got things like proportionality, making sure you're 110% perfect on day one is probably not going to happen. As I said, firms are looking at this as a chance to have a look again at how they've dealt with operational resilience in the whole, and their project plans are looking at, you know, for day one, this is where we want to get to, but we appreciate that over the course of 12, 24 months, we've got some further work to do. But that's all being signposted in project plans and going up to senior management and through governance forums, because there's coming back on the senior managers theme as well and linking back into that, there's a big focus on governance and accountability around that. So you will need to push up your implementation plans to senior managers. They will need to be appraised of your progress and to buy in and ultimately to sign off where you've got to and what the plan is as well.
Great. So I wanted to talk a little bit, or I wanted you to talk a little bit about proportionality and what that means. And it's a fairly intangible term, it feels. How should people be interpreting that and applying it in practice? What's the sort of advice that you would be giving to firms where they say, well, tell me what proportionality means and how I can use it to my my benefit?
Yeah. So look, I've got two stories. One, we've got a client that's regulated by the Dutch regulator who tried to speak to them about operational resilience and proportionality, and they said doesn't exist. Like, well, yeah, it does. It's here in the law. They were like, yeah, we don't care. There's no proportionality in the Netherlands. So if you're in the Dutch market, that's not a great start. Then we have firms who are coming to us and saying, well, there's this proportionality light touch, and that means we don't have to comply, doesn't it? No, there's proportionality in there, but it's not a get out of jail free card. So even if there's a lighter touch regime, if you're an SNI, so a small and non-interconnected firm under the investment firms prudential regime that got implemented recently in Europe, if you're in that camp, you can disapply some things, but they're not completely switched off. So you get a slightly lighter touch regime, but you still have to go through all of the DORA pillars and the requirements to get yourself there as well. So you don't get out of jail free, and everyone needs to comply with everything. So what does that mean? Because I haven't answered the question. What proportionality says in the law is you have to implement it, or you can implement it according to your size, the risks of your business, the markets that you operate in, the types of clients that you've got. I think really this comes down to a risk-based approach. So what we're doing with clients at the moment is understanding, having a look and interrogating what processes, procedures do they already have in place and policies, trying to understand what they've already got in place, then working with them to identify what does DORA require, and then just trying to do a simple gap fill. This is not, although some firms will turn it into it, I don't think this is an exercise where you want to go in, completely rip up everything you've got and come out with 36 new policies. I think 36 is actually the list that DORA requires. Most of those 36 policies are probably already somewhere else in your organisation. You've got business continuity plans, you've got disaster recovery plan, you've got IT security plans, you've got a data privacy policy. As I said at the start, this is to bring all of that stuff together. So rather than let consultants come in, tear them all up and give you 36 new policies, work with what you've got and add bits to them and sort of update them is how we're working on it as well. So it's the policies and procedures bit, and then it's the ICT service providers and the vendor management piece. You're going to need to go out to your population of third-party vendors, have a look at intragroup service agreements, because DORA mandates that all of your contracts have about 12 to 15 different mandatory contractual requirements. So again, when you get to that stage, in our view, proportionality means have a look at the vendor population in its entirety. We've got a pitch on at the moment for 10,000 contracts to be remediated. Awkward. Have a look at that vendor population and then put them into risk buckets. So which of those vendors support a critical function? How critical is that critical function? And how important is that service provider to that critical function? And I think where you end up is if they don't support a critical function, you can probably deal with it via simple overlay agreement. You might even decide to deal with that after implementation date, because actually the requirements, the contractual requirements that need to go into those contracts are probably things that you should already have in contracts. They're things that 80% of the time you would have already dealt with if you've got decent standard terms. For those that support critical functions, I think what you probably want to do is separate them into high, medium and low impact, or some category of tiering system. Then you need to work out systematically how you're going to play the game. We expect some of the biggest, most critical providers, the cloud providers, the big data providers, the ones that are always difficult to negotiate with, they will probably come out late with their own standard terms. You will not be able to push your own paper onto the likes of Amazon, Google, Bloomberg, Fidessa and the likes. They will have their own standard terms, because the only way that their tech can work is on a one-to-many basis. They're going to need to scale their terms up, and everyone needs to suck up the same terms and conditions. They will be last to the party. So you need to then work out, okay, so what can I do now to get ahead of the game, to show that my management information is trending up, I'm trending towards compliance without destroying the festive period. Because most of us are going to have a terrible Christmas period or festive period. So then, okay, let's take some of the lower tier and the medium tier, and let's work out which ones can we push our own paper onto and which ones do we want to start negotiations with now. And that's really the game that we're trying to play with clients at the moment.
Okay, great. Brad, we're now going to go to a quick fire yes/no section. Some of these are a bit cruel, so please forgive me in advance, but you can only say yes or no to
I don't have any qualifiers.
Okay. No qualifiers. No. So will the DORA deadline change?
No. That was easy.
Will DORA make a difference to financial institution resilience in the EU?
Yes.
Okay. Is DORA like GDPR in the sense of being a global trendsetter?
Yes, but the UK went first.
Okay. Will we see a UK DORA equivalent soon?
Already got it. I didn't say yes or no.
Okay. Will Keir Starmer have achieved more after 49 days than Liz Truss?
No.
Oh, interesting.
She did a lot in 49 days.
That's true. Okay.
Ideally, he takes his time. Doesn't anyway.
Okay, and last one. In 10 years, should I be using generative AI to answer my DORA questions rather than Ashurst's?
Yes, save me. No, I might not be at Ashurst in 10 years. I could have retired because of AI, so you'll see what happens.
Okay, Brad, thanks very much. Does anyone have any questions, any DORA questions for Brad? go. They know everything about DORA now.
Very good.
Thank you very much.